Perverted police officers arrested a black woman in an expensive car, not believing her word and thinking she was a criminal. They humiliated her and overstepped their authority, not realizing she was an FBI agent. Their aggression and bias would prove disastrous for their careers. Subscribe to find out how the truth came out and leave a comment. Where are you watching this? Kendra Green, a young but highly skilled FBI agent, stood in front of her mirror, adjusting the silk strap of her dark emerald evening gown. The smooth fabric clung to her figure with elegance, exuding an aura of confidence she knew she needed for tonight. But beneath the surface of poise and readiness, Kendra's mind was a whirlpool of tension. This wasn't just any mission, it was the biggest undercover operation of her career. Failure wasn't an option. Tonight, she was tasked with infiltrating an elite club frequented by some of the wealthiest and most powerful individuals in the country. Individuals who, unbeknownst to the public, were orchestrating a massive money laundering scheme and illegal arms deals. The operation demanded that Kendra blend in seamlessly among the elite, who thrived in a world where influence and appearance were everything. There would be no room for mistakes. Her dark brown skin gleamed under the soft lighting of the hotel suite where she had spent hours preparing. She ran her hand through her curled hair, making sure every strand was in place. A delicate pair of diamond earrings dangled from her ears, complementing the subtle shimmer of makeup on her face. The dress, the jewelry, the perfectly styled hair. Every detail had been meticulously chosen to craft the perfect image for tonight. It had to say, "I belong here." Kendra opened a velvet case lying on the bed and pulled out a set of tools, tiny microphones, concealed recorders, and a compact earpiece. She slipped the recorder into her clutch and attached the microphone discreetly along the hem of her dress. Her earpiece fit snugly into her ear, hidden beneath her curls. She checked the connection one last time with her team waiting in the surveillance van blocks away. "You good, Kendra?" Her handler's voice crackled over the earpiece. "I'm good," she whispered. "Heading out now. I'll keep the line open." She exhaled slowly, forcing the nerves back into a corner of her mind. She couldn't afford distractions, not tonight. Sliding into a pair of high heels, she grabbed her keys and purse, then made her way to the parking lot. There, in the reserved space, sat a sleek black Aston Martin, rented specifically for this mission. As she approached the car, Kendra felt the weight of the evening settle on her shoulders. Not only was she going undercover in unfamiliar territory, but she also carried the invisible burden of being a black woman in an environment that would scrutinize her every move. It wasn't the first time she'd faced prejudice, and it wouldn't be the last. Still, tonight, she needed to be more than just an agent. She needed to be perfect. Sliding into the driver's seat, Kendra let the leather interior embrace her as she adjusted the mirrors and checked the dashboard. Everything was in place. The hum of the engine roared to life as she pulled out of the hotel lot and merged onto the city streets. The streets were dimly lit, with only the occasional flash of streetlights cutting through the darkness. Her heart pounded in sync with the low rumble of the engine, every second bringing her closer to the club and the dangerous individual she was about to confront. She knew the clock was ticking. The meeting inside the club would begin soon, and if she missed it, the entire operation would collapse. Halfway to her destination, Kendra noticed the glow of blue and red lights reflecting off the rearview mirror. A police car, trailing her from behind, flashed its lights and signaled for her to pull over. A sharp sting of anxiety shot through her chest. "Just stay calm," she told herself, pulling the Aston Martin to the side of the road. "It's just routine." But deep down, Kendra knew this might not be just routine. She rolled down the window and waited as two officers approached the car. Both white, both looking far too interested in the woman sitting behind the wheel of a luxury car. One officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, leaned against the door with a smirk. His partner, a stocky man with tattoos peeking from under his sleeves, stood a few steps back, eyeing her like a predator assessing its prey. "Evening, ma'am," Buzzcut said, his tone slick and condescending. "You mind telling us where you're headed in such a fancy ride?" Kendra kept her voice steady. "I'm on my way to an event. Everything's in order." "An event, huh?" The stocky officer chimed in, his voice laced with skepticism. "And this car belongs to you?" Kendra reached into her purse slowly, producing her ID and registration. "Here are my documents. Everything is legal." Buzzcut took the papers, glancing over them with a smirk that told Kendra he wasn't buying it. "These look real fancy. Mind stepping out of the car, miss?" Kendra tensed. "Is there a reason for that, officer?" The smirk deepened. "Let's just say we've had a few reports about stolen vehicles in the area. And, well, you don't exactly look like you belong behind the wheel of a ride like this." Her patience thinned. "I'm an FBI agent," she said firmly, pulling out her badge and flashing it. "I'm on official business. I need to be on my way." The officers exchanged glances, and for a moment she thought reason might prevail. But instead, Buzzcut leaned closer, his smirk turned into a sneer. "FBI, huh? That's cute. Never seen an agent dressed up like this. You sure you didn't borrow that badge from a boyfriend?" The stocky officer laughed. "Come on, sweetheart. Why don't you step out? Maybe we can get to know each other better. No need to be in such a hurry." Kendra's hands clenched the steering wheel. She could feel the situation spiraling out of control. "Step out of the vehicle," Buzzcut repeated, his tone darkening. "Now." With a slow, deliberate motion, Kendra opened the door and stepped out, her heart racing. She knew how these encounters could end, and it was never good. "Hands on the hood," the stocky officer barked, moving closer. "You're making a mistake," Kendra warned, but they weren't listening. Buzzcut grabbed her wrist roughly, yanking her arm behind her back. "Mistake or not, you're coming with us." Before she could respond, the stocky officer shoved her against the hood of the car, pressing her down hard. The cold metal bit into her skin through the thin fabric of her dress. "Easy now," he muttered, his breath hot against her ear. "We'll take real good care of you." Kendra felt her pulse hammering in her ears. She knew the operation was slipping further and further out of reach with every second she spent on this roadside. And yet, this was just the beginning. Kendra felt the cold grip of metal as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, her arms painfully pinned behind her back. The buzz-cut officer yanked her roughly away from the car and toward their patrol vehicle, ignoring her repeated attempts to reason with them. "This is unnecessary," she said through clenched teeth. "I told you, I'm an FBI agent. I'm on an assignment." "Right, and I'm the Queen of England," the stocky officer shot back, shoving her hard against the hood of their cruiser. Buzzcut laughed, amused by his partner's mockery. "You don't look like no agent. You look like a rich man's side piece." His eyes lingered over her dress, and his smile curled in satisfaction. "Or maybe a high-class escort trying to scam your way into a club you don't belong in." Kendra's jaw clenched tighter, but she forced herself to stay composed. Anger was exactly what they wanted. These weren't just arrogant cops, they were the kind who got off on exerting power, especially over someone like her. But her time was running out. The meeting at the club would start soon, and if she didn't get there, the operation would be in jeopardy. The stocky officer leaned in closer, his breath hot on her skin. "How about you ditch that club and stay with us, sweetheart? We can make sure you have a real fun night." "Get your hands off me," Kendra growled, her voice low and filled with warning. But the officers weren't listening. Buzzcut took her purse from the passenger seat of the Aston Martin, rummaging through it with a smug grin. He pulled out her recorder and microphone, holding them up for his partner to see. "What do we have here?" Buzzcut said mockingly. "Looks like somebody's been playing spy." The stocky officer snickered, snatching the recorder from his partner. "You're really digging a hole for yourself, sweetheart. Now it looks like we got you on illegal surveillance. Big trouble for you." Kendra struggled against the cuffs, her frustration boiling over. "This is government property. I'm authorized to carry that equipment." Buzzcut cut her off with a scoff. "Enough with the FBI crap. You think you can just say the magic words and we'll believe you?" The stocky officer tilted his head, pretending to consider. "Tell you what, honey. How about we cut you a deal? You give us a little company tonight, and we'll forget all about this stolen car and spy toys." Kendra's stomach turned in disgust, but she forced herself to remain calm. Her training kicked in. Anger wouldn't save her. Thinking fast, she knew she needed to create any opening, any sliver of opportunity to contact her team. "Let me make one phone call," she said, her voice calm despite the rage bubbling beneath the surface. "That's my right, even under arrest." The officers exchanged amused glances. "Yeah, sure. One call," Buzzcut said. "Make it quick." They dragged her toward the back seat of the patrol car and shoved her inside. Kendra's mind raced as she dialed her handler's number. "It's Kendra," she whispered urgently when the line connected. "I've been detained. You need to act fast. Get here now." Before she could say more, Buzzcut snatched the phone from her hand and ended the call. "Time's up, Agent," he sneered. "Now let's go somewhere private, and you can tell us more fairy tales about being FBI." The car door slammed shut, and the officers climbed into the front seat, laughing. Kendra's hands ached in the cuffs as she struggled to keep her breathing steady. She knew her team would act fast, but every moment spent in that patrol car was another moment closer to the meeting she was supposed to infiltrate. The patrol car rumbled as they pulled away from the roadside, taking her in the opposite direction of the club. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind frantically calculating how much time she had left. Buzzcut glanced at her through the rearview mirror, his smirk widening. "You know, sweetheart, a girl like you could make a lot of friends in this town. Shame you had to go and make enemies instead." Kendra forced herself to stay silent. Arguing would only escalate the situation further. Instead, she focused on her breathing, willing herself to stay calm. This wasn't the first time she'd been underestimated. She had survived worse. But the stakes were higher now, and every second mattered. They arrived at the precinct, and the officers dragged her inside, ignoring her protests. In the brightly lit hallway, they paraded her in front of other officers, some of whom snickered and made crude remarks. One officer, leaning against a desk, whistled low. "What's the charge, boys? Too pretty to be legal?" Buzzcut smirked. "Unauthorized joyriding and pretending to be FBI?" The stocky officer added with a grin, "plus a little something extra for good measure." They escorted Kendra to a small room and ordered her to strip for a thorough search. Kendra stared them down, her pulse pounding in her ears. "This is illegal. You're violating every protocol." "Protocol," Buzzcut sneered. "Sweetheart, The only protocol we follow here is ours." Despite her protests, they forced her to undress, their eyes lingering far too long on her exposed skin. The humiliation was suffocating, but Kendra kept her gaze steady, refusing to give them the satisfaction of breaking her. They left her with nothing but a thin blanket to cover herself. Alone in the cold room, Kendra sat on the metal bench, the seconds dragging like hours. She clenched the blanket around her, her mind racing. Her only hope now was that her team would act before it was too late. Finally, the door creaked open, and the younger officer from earlier stepped inside. He avoided her gaze, clearly uncomfortable with what had transpired. "Look, I can give you 5 minutes. Make another call if you want," he mumbled, sliding her phone toward her. Kendra didn't waste a second. She dialed her handler again, this time making sure her message was clear. "Get here now. I don't have much time." She hung up just as the stocky officer returned, his grin as sleazy as ever. "Done making your little calls? Good. Now, let's talk about that deal we mentioned earlier." But before he could take another step, the door to the precinct burst open. Kendra's heart raced as the door to the precinct swung open with a force that silenced the snickering officers around her. Her handler, Special Agent Daniel Pierce, strode in with 2 other agents at his side. The smug expressions on the 2 arresting officers vanished in an instant as they registered the cold fury in Pierce's eyes. "Agent Green," Pierce said firmly, his sharp gaze locking onto Kendra. "Are you hurt?" Kendra, still clutching the blanket around her shoulders, gave him a small shake of her head, though the humiliation still burned within her. "I'm fine," she muttered, though the strain in her voice betrayed how close she had come to breaking. Pierce's expression darkened as he turned to the 2 officers. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" Buzzcut and the stocky officer stammered, trying to piece together an excuse. She said she was FBI, but we didn't believe." "You didn't believe her?" Pierce's voice was low and dangerous. "So you thought it was appropriate to handcuff her, strip her, and parade her around like a criminal? You thought that was acceptable?" The officers shuffled their feet, but Pierce wasn't done. "Agent Green is part of an active federal operation. Congratulations, you just interfered with a high-priority mission." The younger officer, the one who had given Kendra her second chance to call, stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. "I tried to tell them—" "Save it," Pierce snapped, cutting him off. "You'll have your chance to explain yourself later." Kendra watched as the weight of their actions finally began to sink in for the 2 offending officers. Their smugness evaporated, replaced by nervous glances between each other. The stocky officer opened his mouth, but Pierce held up a hand, silencing him. "You 2 are finished," Pierce said, his voice cold. "Hand over your badges and weapons, now." "Come on, we were just—" Buzzcut began, but the other agent stepped forward, and the look in their eyes made it clear there would be no argument. Reluctantly, the officers handed over their badges and sidearms, their faces pale. Kendra finally stood, her back straight despite the humiliation she had endured. One of the other agents handed her a set of clothes, a sleek black dress similar to the one she had worn before. She took it without a word, retreating to a side room to change. When Kendra emerged a few minutes later, her demeanor had shifted. She was back in control, an FBI agent on a mission. Pierce gave her a brief nod of approval. "You good to go?" he asked. "I'm ready," Kendra replied, her voice steady. Pierce motioned towards the door. "Let's move. We've got a meeting to crash." As they exited the precinct, the 2 disgraced officers stood by the desk, watching in silence as the FBI agents swept past them. Kendra didn't spare them a glance. They were irrelevant now, just two more obstacles she had overcome. The night was far from over, and the mission was still hanging in the balance. Kendra slid back into the driver's seat of the Aston Martin, this time with renewed focus. She had lost time, but the operation could still be salvaged if she moved quickly. "We'll provide backup from the van," Pierce said over the comms as Kendra sped through the city streets. "You've got this, Kendra. Just stay sharp." The familiar hum of the engine filled the air as the lights of the city blurred past. Her hands tightened around the wheel, the anger from the encounter with the officers fueling her determination. She refused to let them derail her mission. She arrived at the club just minutes before the meeting was set to begin. Adjusting her dress and slipping the recording devices back into place, Kendra took a deep breath. The club loomed before her, its grand entrance glowing under soft golden lights. She could hear faint music drifting from inside, mingling with the low hum of conversation. As she approached the entrance, the doorman gave her a once-over, clearly impressed by her appearance. "Name?" he asked. Kendra smiled, her expression smooth and confident. "Angela Reed," she said, using the alias assigned for the mission. The doorman checked his list and gave her a nod, stepping aside to let her in. "Enjoy your evening, Miss Reed." With that, Kendra stepped into the lavish interior of the club, the tension in her chest easing ever so slightly. She was inside. Now it was time to finish what she had started. Kendra strode into the lavish interior of the club, every step calculated, every glance purposeful. The soft jazz playing from the grand piano blended with the low hum of conversation. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne flutes, and the glittering chandeliers above cast a warm glow over the room. The atmosphere was elegant, exclusive, and dangerous. She didn't belong here by their standards, but that didn't matter. Kendra had a mission to complete. Her eyes swept across the room as she made her way deeper into the gathering. The elites, dressed in designer suits and gowns, exchanged quiet words about business ventures, upcoming deals, and discreet alliances. She spotted her target almost immediately. A circle of men standing near the bar, their body language tense but controlled. These were the players she had come to expose. At the center of the group stood Victor Greaves, a notorious financier known to launder money for arms dealers. Beside him was Antonio Diaz, a well-known trafficker who kept his operations hidden behind a facade of legitimate business deals. Kendra's pulse quickened. She was in the right place. Now, she just needed to make sure she got what she came for. She slipped into the crowd, seamlessly blending in as she moved closer to her targets. A waiter passed by, and she grabbed a champagne flute, lifting it casually to her lips while positioning herself within earshot. The small microphone sewn into her dress captured every word as the men discussed details of their next major deal, a multi-million-dollar arms transaction scheduled to take place overseas. Kendra's heart pounded as she listened, the weight of the recording device in her clutch suddenly feeling heavier. She had them. All she needed was a little more. Something to seal their fate beyond any reasonable doubt. Just as she edged closer to the group, one of the men noticed her. Greaves's sharp eyes locked onto hers, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to suspicion. "And who might you be?" he asked, his voice smooth but probing. Kendra smiled effortlessly, the kind of smile that hinted at secrets of her own. "Angela Reed," she said, extending her hand gracefully. "Investor. I couldn't resist joining the festivities tonight." Greaves didn't take her hand, but his gaze lingered as if trying to place her. Investor, huh? And what do you invest in, Miss Reed? Kendra gave a small shrug, her smile never faltering. Opportunities. For a moment, the tension hung between them, thick and heavy. Then, with a slow nod, Greaves accepted her answer. Well then, he said, raising his glass, to opportunities. Kendra clinked her glass against his, her pulse steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. She was in. Now, all she had to do was wait for the right moment to signal her team. The night wore on, and Kendra stayed close to the group, listening intently as they finalized the details of their illicit deal. She slipped away briefly, under the guise of getting another drink, and whispered into her earpiece. They've confirmed the transaction. We've got enough to move. Pierce's voice came through the comms, calm and assured. Copy that. We're moving in. Be ready. Kendra returned to the group, positioning herself between Greaves and Diaz just as the front doors of the club swung open. FBI agents flooded the room, moving with precision and purpose. FBI, Pierce's voice boomed over the sudden chaos. Everyone stay where you are. The guests froze in shock as agents surrounded the group of criminals. Greaves and Diaz exchanged furious glances, realizing too late that they had been caught. Kendra stood perfectly still, watching as Pierce approached, his badge gleaming under the chandelier's light. Victor Greaves, Antonio Diaz, Pierce said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. You're under arrest for conspiracy, money laundering, and illegal arms trafficking. Kendra stepped aside as the agents moved in, securing the two men. Greaves shot her a venomous look, his voice dripping with contempt. Who the hell are you? Kendra met his gaze, her expression cool and composed. FBI, she said, her voice laced with a quiet satisfaction. The operation was over, but Kendra's night wasn't. As the criminals were led away in handcuffs, she allowed herself a moment to breathe. The weight of the past few hours finally began to lift from her shoulders. Despite the setback with the officers earlier, she had succeeded. Outside the club, Pierce approached her, a rare smile playing at the corner of his lips. Hell of a job, Kendra. Even with all the crap you went through tonight, you pulled it off. Kendra gave him a tired but triumphant smile. Just another day on the job, she said, though they both knew it was far from ordinary. As the team packed up and prepared to leave, Kendra received one final piece of news. Those two officers from earlier had been suspended pending a full investigation. The charges against them ranged from unlawful detainment to sexual harassment, and they were unlikely to wear a badge again. Justice, it seemed, had caught up with them too. Kendra allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. They thought they could humiliate her, break her spirit, but in the end, she stood victorious, having completed her mission and exposed those who thought themselves untouchable. As the city lights flickered above, Kendra drove the Aston Martin through the quiet streets, the hum of the engine soothing after a night of chaos. She knew there would be other missions, other obstacles, but for now she had done what she came to do, and she had proven once again that no matter how steep the odds, she would not be broken. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more exciting content. And while you're here, why not check out our other videos? We've got plenty more for you to explore. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below, and let's keep the conversation going.